Hey, everybody doing great? Yeah, sort of. Okay, good. We are continuing today our comfort food series. We're still in the Gospel of Mark. And so we're we pick up actually where we left off last week on our study. So we are now to where, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into the scripture this morning and then backtrack a little bit with some comments related to connecting last week's session with today. So we're going to begin with the 7th chapter, the 24th verse through the first part of 26 in this first section. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. Some people call it Tyre. Tyre is the traditional saying there, which is an unclean place for Jesus to be. Remember last week we were talking about clean and unclean, acceptable and unacceptable. This is an unclean place. And he entered a house, which is an unclean thing to do, and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him. And she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman who is unclean was a Gentile, which is unclean, of Syrophoenician origin. And that's that geographic area. And let's just go ahead to the next one with that. And there she begged him, which was an unclean thing to do, to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Now, as gospel stories go, today is a little different, but at first glance, it kind of appears to be a fairly usual story for Jesus. Jesus heals a woman's daughter of a demon. We've heard about that before. And then he opens the ears of a deaf man. We've heard about that before. So what's new about this story? Jesus has healed a lot of people. And we see more and more of that take place as we get deeper into the Gospels. In actuality, we are continuing Jesus's teaching, as I mentioned before, about what is acceptable and unacceptable last week. What is clean and unclean? Last week, we talked about the traditions of the elders and the fact that the elders had implied and imposed more and more rules on the people, trying to get them to be more righteous, more faithful to their faith. And so they just kind of add on to that as time goes on. And so we also talked about eating with dirty hands. Eating food with dirty hands. Remember, the disciples had done that, and the scribes and the Pharisees were upset about that they were breaking the rule by not washing their hands righteously or ritually with that. They had defiled hearts, and the defiled things that come out of us, noting that it is not what in us that defiles us or what goes in us, but what comes out that is defiled. And if you remember, Phil mentioned in his sermon this week that it is just not the food that comes out after it's been used. It is the things that come out of our hearts and our minds and the ways that we go about our daily living that sometimes create defilement in our lives. And so this week, we're looking at the places and the people that are unacceptable and unclean by tradition and by these rules. As we look closer, we see that this is a different experience than what we've heard about before. We're able to see that there are two places where Jesus performed two miracles that are on the outside of the boundaries of where Jesus's ministry has taken place thus far. We are out of the Galilee area, and we're going to take a look in a few minutes at the map and where that is. And the first miracle takes place at Tyre, in the land of Tyre or Tyre, and Sidon, in which is in the northern area. Remember the Sea of Galilee is here, and it's to the north with that, which is in present-day Lebanon, where Jesus heals a Gentile woman's daughter. Jesus has traveled about 50 miles north from where he has been appearing, and you'll see the map here. It appears, and it appears in this story that Jesus is by himself. We don't hear the story about the disciples being all around him at this point. So we see Jesus kind of going on it on his own at this point, which is new and different at this point. And he's there just to visit initially what the scriptures say, these Gentile cities. And this is unusual because his focus to this point in the story has been to share the gospel or the news with the Israelites, with the lost sheep, if you want to call it that, of Israel. And so in this story, Jesus seems to be a discouraging person to this woman. This woman comes and asks for his help, and he kind of throws a derogatory comment back to her. And it's almost to the point of being rude. This is a different kind of Jesus. Everybody else, it seems, that comes to Jesus seeking assistance, seeking help, seeking healing is accepted and welcomed. But this woman is different. When she comes to him, he is not very kind almost to her. And he's reminding her that the children who are the Jews have priority over those that are dogs, those who are Gentiles. So he's calling this woman a dog, or implying that with that. And so in that day, Jews often called Gentiles dogs. They use words that would be unkind and unflattering for them. It's in a very derogatory way that they use that. And we know slang words today that we throw out at people that describe them in ways that are not very helpful, not very kind. Yet the Greek word that Jesus used here is kind of an unusual word. It's a different word than just usual dogs. It implies that it's little dogs. And this is a way to kind of soften the blow, I think, for Jesus. You know how in the South we say, bless your little heart. Well, that just means, you know, we're being kind, as we're kind of undercutting a little bit with that. And maybe that's what Jesus is doing here, is just saying, bless your little heart. You know, you're a little dog with that. And that word is really used very sparingly in the scriptures, but here Jesus uses it here. And it appears that he is reminding her of her place. Yes, she is a Gentile, but in the midst of that, Jesus is not really trying to push her away. He's just trying to set the boundaries, I think, with his here. And so the woman responds with great faith. First of all, she seems to accept her place. She doesn't say, don't you call me a dog, or something like that. You know, she doesn't throw it right back at him. She, you know, kind of takes on the fact that, yeah, she is to you, this Jew, she is a Gentile. And secondly, she asked Jesus to deal with her on that level. She's asking for assistance, but she's not asking to be elevated in a way that is beyond the norm with that. And at this point in time, I get the impression she's going to do anything it takes to get her child healed. And if that means taking a little bit from Jesus, she's willing to do that, if she can get from him the healing of her child. And so this was not the time to debate her status. This was not the time to confront Jesus which was not accepted also in the world and culture in which we live. And therefore, she receives Jesus' blessing, and the daughter is healed. The woman understands the power of Jesus. Somehow, she understands and knows the power of that. And she understands that even the morsels, the crumbs, whatever it is that Jesus can provide that would just be falling on the floor that the dogs would eat is powerful stuff. Just crumbs are important. If one can't have the full meal, one can at least have the crumbs. That would be enough to maybe heal her daughter. So we're going to take a look. Andy, if you go back to the map there for a second. Again, we want to remind us that the Sea of Galilee right there, and you see this is most of the area that we hear about Jesus's ministry. He goes up farther north to Caesarea Philippi and up into this area, but to get up into Tyre and Sidon up here is kind of out of the jurisdiction. It's out of the home. And so we have Jesus moving up in that direction. This region was in the east, as we can see, or northeast of that. And so they have, you can see that at the area there. The second map that we have sets the tone for where we go next. And again, you see Tyre and Sidon up here. And over here, we see the Decapolis. And this is the next area we're going to mention. So Jesus is kind of skirting around his usual area here of the Galilee, first north, and then it says to us in the scripture that he goes back here and then heads down with that. And so with this particular map, which is east, and you see what is in the area, what would now be Jordan, where 10 major Roman cities are, which is called the Decapolis here, and they're located. And clearly, Jesus has expanded his boundaries for his ministry. He's beyond the Galilee. He's going to surrounding areas. And more importantly, he's beginning to broaden his scope of his ministry to include both the Jews as well as the Gentiles. And there are some scholars that feel like this is kind of the turning point for that ministry for Jesus, that he has really been in ministry and reaching out to the Jews. But with these events that are taking place, he is beginning to branch out intentionally, reaching out to those of another culture in another world. And so he's broadened the scope that he's going. And with that, I think it causes us then to ask the question for us as a church and as individuals and people of faith is where are the boundaries of God drawn? How broad do those boundaries go? Sometimes we limit ourselves into our geographic boundary or into our cultural boundaries or our gender boundaries, any of those kinds of things that we begin to say, here's where the line is drawn. And beyond this point, we're not willing to go. But how far do we go? How far does Jesus call us to go beyond what is comfortable, to go beyond where our home is, to reach out? A lot of times it was important in the area of the country I grew up in to know about people's people. Tell me about your people. Who are they? Where have they been? What have they done? And so that often got you accepted or not accepted into various areas of the country, is based on what is your history? What do you know about yourself? What do you know about your people? Do we know your people? And if we do know your people, are they okay? And so we have that here. So how far can we go as people of faith beyond what is comfortable to us? Then if you'll go to the next slide there, we'll pick up then on this next story, which is where Jesus cures a deaf man. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon which again is unclean, towards the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis, which is unclean. Again, it's beyond, it's on the other side. If you remember that map, it's on the other side of the Sea of Galilee, on the other side of the Jordan. They brought him a deaf man who was unclean, who had an impediment in his speech. And they begged him, Jesus, to lay his hand on the man, unclean. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and he put his fingers in his ears, and he spat, and he touched his tongue, which is unclean. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephata, that is, be opened. And immediately his ears were opened. His tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. I think that's a powerful statement. Immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And throughout his history, Jesus used many different ways to heal people. That's one of the things I appreciate about the scriptures and our understanding of it, is that in our tradition, we don't have a single way to experience Jesus Christ. We don't have a prayer of salvation that only can be and has to be prayed, or only experienced God in a particular way. And so he has healed people with his words. He has healed people without a word. He's healed people in his presence. He's healed people that are distant. He has healed people in response to one's own faith. He's also healed people based on the faith of others. He has healed in response to who has asked. He's healed people that have just asked to be healed, and he has healed those that he has approached. And whether it was Jesus miraculously touching somebody, whether it was an encounter that took place, whether it was just reaching out and just touching the hem of his garment, there was healing that took place. So then Jesus ordered them to tell no one. You know, this becomes the pattern for Jesus in the Gospels. You know, I've done this for you, but the time is not right. The time is not the time to proclaim it. But yet people just can't help it. They can't help but tell people about what Jesus has done. And I don't know if you've had that into your life or not. Have you ever had a time when you were supposed to be quiet about something, you weren't supposed to tell anybody, and you just couldn't stand it? You just had to let it out. And these people, you know, Jesus has said, okay, let's keep it down. Let's keep it quiet. And they're thankful. They're appreciative. And they just can't not tell people. And so, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. Shh, 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 be quiet. And it just gets louder and it's louder with that. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, he has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. And if you were to read just a little farther along in Mark's gospel, and I don't want to get into too far what's going to be coming down the pike, we'll find the story of the feeding of the multitude. And we've already talked about it before. And then there's going to be another story, but this time it's not about a 5,000 feeding on the hillside of Capernaum. It's a crowd of 4,000 on the other side of the Galilee, on the Sea of Galilee, where it's the Gentile side. It's the side that the Jewish mothers would tell their little boys, you don't go to that neighborhood. You stay home where you're supposed to. You just don't play with those children over there. And that you would never, ever go there for any reason. And so when we go to Israel on our trips, we often go to the sites of both the feeding of the 5,000 at Tabgha, and also, which is the Jewish side. And you'll see a picture here, the next one. That's the wrong one. I mentioned, there you go, that one. This is on the Jewish side. This is at Tabgha. This is at the Chapel of the Multiplication. It's at the foot of the Capernaum area there. And you can see there's the fish and there's the loaves, there's the basket that we do that. But we also go to then the feeding of the 4,000, which is on the other side. If you'll go back to the other slide. And you'll see this is at the chapel in Corsi. This is a mosaic that's a little over 1,500 years old that was in the floor of that chapel there that has been excavated. And you can see there's something a little different about this. This is a basket that is a Gentile basket. Now, how do we know that? What's different about this basket than the one we saw before? It's got a handle on it. And that was part of the design that was different. That's one of the ways that they're able to tell in the mosaics and other things, kind of where the region of that is. Now, this was, of course, made years after Jesus. And so it's not from the first century, but it is also from, 500 years later, in which that tradition is lifted up. And so we have that, and that's on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And then this next picture here, you go to the next one, there we go, is also at the region of Corsi. And this is the region that the Gentiles would be, and this is a place that commemorates that. And you'll see that they've got the sign for Jesus, they've got the fish, the loaves, and then they've got 7 baskets there which have handles on them. And that again reminds us of the Gentiles. And so each of these mosaics were embedded in the floor of chapels as signs for that. And just to remind us that Jesus's act of caring and loving for the people was in the multiplication of the very little to give to the many. And this is almost like the same thing that we're hearing about the Syrophoenician woman. These are the leftovers that were there, and that's what the woman's talking about. Just same thing. I just want the leftovers. I just want the little crumbs. I just want what it is that I can have in my state of life, just enough to help me out and to experience that. And so both the loaves and the fish are there, the baskets are there, but they have symbolic memory for us, and that we would remember that Christ provides for us in all days and in all ways. And it's a great story for us to talk about today. We do have some questions, as you would see here. So I'll let you go ahead around your table groups there. And those of you online, thank you for being here today. And Andy will get you divided up. So we can jump into these questions. You can take them in whatever order, whichever ones you want. Yes, I see that hand.
No, just a question about the handle versus no handle. Is there a cultural reference behind that? Do we know why on one side of the basket without having handle?
It's kind of like regionalism. It kind of becomes the way things are done. How much intentionality, I don't know, Matt or Phil, if you have a sense of how much intentionality it was. If the Jews have a basket without a handle, then we must have a handle, or if it's just that's the way they were made. One of the interesting things is at Corsi, the earliest monastery in Israel is found in that area. And it's found at Corsi. And one of the gifts that Charles Page, if you remember, the archaeologist that we have had here before and led the first trip that I took over there, one of the gifts he gave my daughter when she graduated from college was a small vase that is 3,000 years old that they found in that region. And they know it came from a place other than that because of the design of the pitcher. It's just a small pitcher that is about that big, that's fine and is in great shape for the age that it is. But they know it came from somewhere else because of 2 things. One is the clay that was used is different, and the design is not a design that came from that place. And so, you know, why it happened, I don't know, Phil or Matt, if you have a better response than I do.
Detail that showed up in the stories. I don't know that I've ever heard it. It shows up in the art backside of the story, and so it helps us identify which story is being referred to. I remember a lot of the ways that people would learn scripture pre-literacy was through art, and so that detail would help people distinguish. Wait, which feeding miracle are we talking about? You know, as we learn it through the story. So I spent class 6 on it later on.
Matt was just saying, for those of you that are online, that as in art, we use symbolic images, you know, icons, for instance, in the Orthodox Church, you have to draw Paul the same way every time. And you have to use the same design for each of the saints the same way every time. So you'll know that's who it is. And so maybe the handles on the baskets that were used was a way to help identify which story we're talking about, or which stories we're talking about, and which culture we're talking about with that. So, all right, let's get in. Yes, one more. Sure.
So I'm looking at these 2 examples here where Jesus said he didn't want anyone to know that he had done this. And then he didn't want anybody to tell the story. And so I've always struggled with, well, why? Like, when did Jesus care about what anybody thought? You know, that's why I was like, he's going to do what he's going to do. So why was it significant that he did? Was it not going into the unclean place? I mean, like before, I would think, like he would be doing that on purpose to show that there's equality. So why would he? I'm just curious.
Chris is asking the question, why did Jesus tell people on a regular basis, don't tell anybody? And for my take on it is that it's really a symbolic gesture with that. The time is not right to disclose this. And in most traditions, or not most, in some traditions, it's not until we get to Caesarea Philippi when Jesus says, "Who do the people say I am?" And Peter says, "What? You are the Messiah." And he says, "Bless you." You know, now's the time. And it's from that point that Jesus begins to set his eyes on Jerusalem and the fulfillment. And so for me, it's a symbolic way to say to people, yes, I'm doing these things for you through God. It is God who gets the glory for this. But now's not the time to reveal. Now's not the time to explain to everybody who and what I am. There will be a time, and that time is coming, but it's not quite here yet. The other thing in the Gospel of Mark is the hurry-up gospel. Everything happens immediately. Everything happens in quick course. It's the shortest of the Gospels. It's also the one that tries to get to the story very quickly. And so I think for the gospel writer here, yes, it's important. Yes, it's quick, but it's not quite. It's not quite. It's not quite this time to say this is it. All right, let's get around the tables and do the questions.
Okay, for you folks on Zoom, I hope you can hear me. I think we're going to break into 2 breakout rooms. So stand by, here goes, and then we'll call you back when it's time to reconvene and have a closing prayer. Thanks for being with us today.
I would probably, I can't remember who that guy is. You can write it down. Hey, turn that off the screen.
Yeah, go ahead and push the button.
It needs to be a solid red.
All breakout rooms will close in 20. You guys have 26, 25, 24 seconds to finish your conversation.